Rick Dangerous back at it again, and this time he's on the Raspberry Pi 4. So for those of you, I reviewed the Raspberry Pi 3 image, the 128 gigabyte. It's also my impression that he did a 64 gigabyte, and now we have the 256 gigabyte, so doubling it each time, but this time it will work for the Raspberry Pi 4B. So a lot of you out there now have made the upgrade. It's a great upgrade. You're going to be able to play Dreamcast and Nintendo 64 and Atomic Wave and PSP much better on the Pi 4 versus the Pi 3. Now this image is a little different. It's not like Virtual Man's and Wolfenose's image where it's got everything, right? The Game Boy Advance has 1,000 titles. There's only 90 here. So this is kind of the best games, which is always a cool image for me to review because there's a lot of games that I never get a chance to play. So if somebody says, oh yeah, you got to try this game, this is a really good game, then this is definitely one I want to check out. Now, I spent special detail on this one. I found every little mistake I could, but also, to check it out and see if you guys would like it or not. You can even see there's a little Photoshop mistake here with the guy from Metal Slug over by his bicep. But for the most part, what I did, I tested every single system on this image, and I tested everything, and I went through it, and I have my rundown of this image, what I think about it, and why you might want it. So please stay tuned. We'll go ahead and check those things out. All right, so as you saw, it's just a very generic RetroPie splash screen, which is just fine. It's well optimized, and because there's not a lot of systems, this thing boots up really fast. Now, this is only 1,800 games, and his last image, the 128 gigabyte image, which won't work for the Raspberry Pi 4 because it's a Raspberry Pi 3 image, only had 1,400 games. So for the doubling the size, only added 1/4 the amount of games, and that's because all the games he added were pretty much in the Atomic Wave, Game Boy Advance, and Dreamcast. There might have been some other ones over there, but 157 Dreamcast games is a ton of space. Now, I love the Sega Dreamcast, and it runs great on the Raspberry Pi 4, so I like what he did there and the decision he made. But that's really the biggest differences. This theme he has is really beautiful, and I said this in my last review. That was one of the things I actually really liked about this image was how, look how clean this is to scroll. Where when you go into a game, it takes a couple seconds for the video splash screens to show up. It's nothing like if you were to run a front end like this on a PC, but that is the limitation of the Raspberry Pi in general, and most themes are like this. But you can go between consoles here, and it's pretty fast. Right, so I like the experience that this particular theme allows, and so that's his Rick Dangerous, and then he has a regular theme. So just one theme installed. He did install screensavers. You can hit select on your controller, and the next thing you know, you're checking out screensavers from game. It's basically video game snaps that were already on this image. For those wondering, those are these little videos that play when you hover over a game. Those are now playing as your screensaver. And you can hit select to trigger those, or you can go into your settings over here, and there should be somewhere screensaver. So for this one, after every 5 minutes of not touching your controller, it will go ahead and play random videos. So that is enabled here. The other thing he added was the bezel project. So not a lot of scripts installed, just like his last one, but he did add the bezel project. So now the games, like I was saying, only 400 additional games. But he has a really good favorites list. And actually, I've noticed his favorite list is the exact same from his 128 gigabyte image. So he didn't add any of his Atomic Wave or Dreamcast games to his favorites. I'm assuming maybe those are all of his favorites, or he just didn't get to it per se. Now, these are some of the games I recently played up to that, and then these are the other ones that he was playing. Okay, so he's testing out a lot of the Dreamcast games. Very cool. And actually, that gets me to what I love about this image, that everything from Amiga, I played every single system on this image. And the only problem I found was that the Dreamcast controls are not set up. They're absolutely blank. So in order to do that, you either need to set up your Dreamcast controls through, RetroPie setup in the options menu, or load a game, hook up a keyboard or something like that, hit escape, and then within the Redream menu, when you load up a Dreamcast game, I'll just load one up for you here really quick. You can even just hook up a mouse to mouse or keyboard or an air mouse, and once you launch, you should be able to hit escape on your keyboard. Here we go, and then you go to input. and you go to your port, and then you can set your controls here. I actually want to do my generic Xbox, and you see here I've already configured it, right? But actually, when I first booted up this image, it looked like this. It was all nothing. So all I had to do was, click on this, click up on my analog stick, click on this, down, left, right, and you can do it with your keyboard as well to move around the control. So let me go ahead and exit that. That was one of the little things you had to do. So back to what I was getting at, what I love about the image was like everything was working. Sometimes when you load certain games, certain things, they don't run. It's like somebody just threw on these games and they didn't actually test them out. So I even played MS-DOS. They were working well. PC Engine CD-ROM, Sega CDs all set up. The only thing is you will see a little bit of lag in Atomic Wave and Neo Geo CD, and a lot of that just has to do with limitations of the Raspberry Pi 4. So let's go ahead and look at these collections here. You got about 100 games in Nintendo, just the best of the best. 22 MS-DOS games, some really fun ones in there. PC Engine, 20 games total. And because these are so small collections, I'll scroll through the games list so you guys could see if you're looking for a specific game. This is his 128 gigabyte image had over 150 PlayStation games as well. This is where a lot of that space is. And if you're into PlayStation and Dreamcast, like this image is going to be really nice for you because it has a lot of those games on it. And so I want to go through this because, yeah, these games, a lot of people do care about exactly what's on the PlayStation set and the Dreamcast set. And we'll definitely look at those. Also, while we're going through these to kind of shorten the video a little bit, ScumVM 60, I'll talk about my thoughts because my final things I do is I play some games. So I'll put the gameplay in. But before we get to the gameplay, my final thoughts as we're looking through these collections here. And as you see, like only 10 Sega 32X, only 37 of the Sega CDs. As I mentioned, he spent a lot of time scraping all the metadata, making sure all the images and video snaps were there. And that's easy to do, easier compared to a lot of other images out there because some of these systems he only has 10, 20, 30 games for it. But as I mentioned, what I really like about it is that it is a best of the best image. He's not trying to outbeat some of the other ones out there that just have everything and they've already done every single script. This is actually, in my opinion, just a very bare bones build as far as like it seems like he just got, the stock RetroPie base image, he threw on his games. He didn't install a bunch of custom scripts. He doesn't have custom splash screens, custom loading screens. He didn't load any of that stuff up. And because of that, some people might enjoy it better because now you can either A, add your own, or you just hate all that extra bling, all that extra, some people might call that bloat, or customization, or, additional themes. So it gives you a good starting point if you want to, start with a kind of a base image that already has some games on it. So I have this on a 400 gigabyte SD card, so I could easily now expand on it. You can absolutely set this on a larger SD card and then go ahead and I can add, for example, that what wasn't on here was Nintendo 64. I would love to add some Nintendo 64. There's quite a bit of games on there that A, I love, and B, run really great on the Raspberry Pi 4. So Amiga, as I mentioned, this is all set up. You don't change the cores or anything. Really good to go. Sometimes the Amiga set is not quite all set up or some of it's not working. And there are some really great games for Amiga. So this is fun. This is cool. Especially for the Raspberry Pi 4. Amiga doesn't always get as much love. So as far as grading, compared to his last image, I would say this is definitely one up. He kind of did a little more customization. He installed those bezel projects. Even the bezel projects for... he did it for arcade, Game Boy Advanced, and Neo Geo CD, and Atomic Wave, and maybe Dreamcast, I forget. But for example, Super Nintendo and Sega CD and a lot of the consoles in that era, the bezel project was not enabled. And you can either add those if you want or not. I think maybe his thinking was to put it on like the arcade style games. So arcade set only 200. It does have your CPS1, CPS2, CPS3, Capcom Play Systems on there. As well as quite a few others. But this is kind of cool, especially with the arcade set. There is a lot of weird arcade games that a lot of people don't necessarily like, and this one kind of hits some of the best of the best. 256 gigabyte SD card's a good size. I always find it weird when people do 200 gig. I think you got to go 64, 128, 256, 400, and then 512, in my opinion. But Salamander's on here, and Salamander 2, great game that often doesn't get included. And so for those reasons, I think he is making a better image here. He put a little bit more time into it and did a couple of tweaks. So for those, I think I gave him a B or B plus on the last one. So I'll give him A minus on this one, especially because I couldn't find. The only thing I think is warranted is go ahead and put Xbox controls on the Dreamcast games. Just assume most people are going to have an Xbox controller, and then a lot of the other controllers will bind over that or just work. And then if they want to reset all their controls, they just have to click that one button. And that's a really small thing. So, and then if there's, some of you might say, oh, all these games suck. So, but I'm not going to take that against him. I'm just saying what somebody else who might poke holes into this is it doesn't have the games you specifically wanted. But I had no issue with unzipping it. It was zipped, so smaller download size. So I'll start from the beginning here. A lot of you want to see the big Dreamcast collection. So no issues. It booted right up. It's fast boot because it doesn't have that many consoles on it, and the version of RetroPie and the kernel on here is just very, it's peppy. It's before it's been a lot of stuff has been added to it. So that's my thoughts on this one. Let me know what y'all think. That's what I think. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And we're going to actually get into some gameplay here where I try each one of these games. But Game Boy Advance 90 games here. And that's the thing about Game Boy Advance. Like, think about all the 2-in-1 games, the game show games that you're never going to play. It just gives you... Yeah, I can tell you, like, a lot of the games here are good games. Sega Master System. And then Mega Drive. Pretty big collection here. No hacks on here. So I was corrected that the reason why the video snaps take so long to load up is he actually has like a delay set on them, so you can absolutely speed that up. I was just saying you can still see some difference though between the Pi 4 and like a PC, for example. But do note that this entire MAME arcade set was been upgraded to MAME 2010. There's only 6 games still on MAME 2003. He said he's been reading retro magazines for years, and that's where he came up with what games to include on this. So for those, it's really, really cool that he has all that personal experience and thoughts, so you get to kind of peek into this and check it out, and it's a lot of fun. I have to admit, I really enjoyed reviewing this particular build, and he's right. Everything was working really well. I just tried to pick random stuff that usually doesn't work or, isn't that great, and it was working really good. So, again, I just try to look at every little thing and then bring it to light, but as I said, this one's definitely much improved, really great, and like I said, A- or A, really good stuff. Hit our first file, 7-zip, extracted it to its own folder. Here it is, total file size, about 238 gigabytes, but it's 256 billion bytes. I'm putting it on a 400 gigabyte because I can't find anything smaller. Make sure you don't format your iPod. I'm actually going to disconnect it just because I don't want to accidentally format my iPod. That's the problem when you have too many devices hooked up at the same time. All right, all done. Let's open Win32, and then let's go ahead and find it. There it is, RetroPie. There it is, right. Let's do it. All right, and then this is going to take some time. Looks like it's going to take me about an hour or 20, probably closer to an hour, depending on how fast your SD card is.